Greetings, everyone, and thank you so much for helping my channel reach 1 million views. In celebration, I present to you the first episode of my new series, Strange Tales. Now, this is a true story about someone else's unbelievable tale. And today we're going to talk about all things good. That is, all things Corey Goode, which is to say some things that are actually pretty bad for the field of ufology. And I'm going to make an argument for that case as we explore everything I can tell you about what's going on with this so-called enigmatic secret space program Whistleblower. So James Corey Goode apparently appeared on the scene when he began posting anonymously to the Project Avalon forums. These are some pretty high-quality forums for people to discuss interesting experiences and matters related to frontier subjects. Corey began posting anonymously about some of his experiences that he felt he had had as part of a government program. That progressed to some audio recordings of Corey kind of describing his experience. And then at a certain point, it's claimed by Corey and his family that Corey's identity was revealed. And he had no choice but to come out completely as one of these secret space program whistleblowers. We can just move to the next stage, which is where Corey Goode really began to explode, which is when he got his own show on the Gaia channel, and his partner for that show was David Wilcock. And the show is called Cosmic Disclosure. Now, let me just briefly describe what Cosmic Disclosure is. It's the most popular series on the Gaia channel. It pulls in approximately 1 to 200,000 viewers per episode. It consists of revelations about the secret space program and a wide variety of other apparently or supposedly connected topics. The kinds of revelations that Blake from Third Phase of Moon would describe as, absolutely mind-boggling, incredible. And I'm sorry, Blake, I know I poke fun at you. I love you, man. Brent, make sure you keep him in line. There's been some incredible revelations on this show, Cosmic Disclosure, all pivoting around Corey Goode. So how is it that Jimmy Goode came by all of the information that he's revealed on Gaia's Cosmic Disclosure show? Before we get into the actual details, I think it's important to kind of set the stage of what Corey is claiming to be. So according to Corey's wife and to Corey felt he had always suspected that he had been part of some government intelligence program, but wasn't really sure what it was or really solid on a lot of the details. Then apparently he went in for some eye surgery to fix a detached retina, and he spent a really unusual amount of time in surgery. And when he came out of surgery and woke up, he could suddenly remember that he had been part of this elaborate secret space program, that he had been recruited into what is called the 20 and Back program, where people are set to work in the secret space program in a kind of time bubble for 20 years, and then at the end of their 20-year stint or contract, they are age regressed and time regressed and brought back to exactly the moment that they signed up and reinserted into society, and they have their memories wiped. So that's what Corey was initially claiming. And when he had these memories come flooding in, apparently it caused depression, a lot of problems, and some very friendly aliens came and wiped some of his memories so that he would be able to deal psychologically with the sudden memories coming flooding back of having been involved in what he describes as a very evil kind of a secret space program offshoot called the Dark Fleet. So anyways, all that remained after this curative mind wipe was his memories of his first 20 and Back. And while he was in this program, he says he remembers reviewing a database of information on something he called a smart glass pad, which is essentially an iPad that projects holograms. And based on his review of this information, he was coming on to the Gaia channel as part of this new show to disclose everything that he had learned during his time in the secret space program. He would also be talking about ongoing direct communications he was having with a variety of alien species, in particular a new species called the blue avians. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves here. Let's just say that the program Corey claimed to be involved in, he says, was so secret. It was 38 levels above the President of the United States secret clearance. So let's get into the details of exactly what Corey claimed to be disclosing on the show. So let's start with the initial information that Corey provided, that also just happens to consist of information that has been out in the public sphere for decades. And we'll kind of try to go chronologically here as best we can. A secret breakaway civilization, a German secret society, began experimenting with UFO, a saucer type craft in the early 20s, and achieved some kind of breakthrough in anti-gravity levitation. They were contacted by some what are called Nordic aliens, which have always been put out in the public sphere as the Nordic aliens. These are the aliens that look most like human beings, and they're very elf-like. They're very Tolkien elf-like, to analogize them. And they had apparently worked with these secret German societies to help them or to guide them. And then they'd been kind of fired, and the secret German societies had taken up with the evil reptilians, who further helped them develop their anti-gravity craft. We get into the 30s, and then the Nazis get interested in what's going on. Already this secret society is sort of apart from what's happening with the Nazis, according to Corey and others. And the reptilians help this secret society produce these crafts. Certain elements of the Nazis join with them. They become part of the breakaway civilization. They build a base in Antarctica. They fly flying saucers out of the base. Essentially, as Germany is losing the war, this secret society with their reptilian allies are kind of developing very rapidly and building up their capabilities from their secret base in Antarctica. Now, on the U.S. side, the U.S. recovers craft that have crashed in the 40s. They began experimenting and reverse engineering them, started coming up with their own progress in the anti-gravity sphere. And they are also approached by these Nordics to help guide the development of the technology. And what happens is, and this is related to the stories about Admiral Byrd and Operation High Jump, is the U.S. takes a fleet down to Antarctica. They get blown out of the water and come back with their tails tucked between their legs. They realize the Nazis weren't defeated. No, they just went to Antarctica, and now they have flying saucers. So apparently, what happens after that is, as part of Operation Paperclip, the CIA recruit a whole bunch of ex-Nazis. Some of these ex-Nazi mad scientists are directly connected to this secret breakaway civilization in Antarctica, and it is through this infiltration means that the Nazis and the reptilians infiltrate the United States deep state, began branching out like a cancer, taking over all of these secret projects, gaining authority over them, and basically writing a very negative future for the United States and its flying saucer program. And basically it's given as the reason for all of the evil that tends to be associated with the deep state and UFO cover-ups and alien cover-ups. Now, the reptilians are apparently a race of aliens, the ones from outer space anyways, and we'll get to the other ones in a bit, that report themselves to a super creepy artificial intelligence entity from another dimension that's actually Lucifer, or Satan, also known as Satan, which seeks to convert all living biological matter into mechanistic kind of artificial intelligence life forms. And it's apparently consumed entire galaxies. And they're, cutting a swath of destruction across the galaxy. And Earth Earth is the latest target. The reptilians do the bidding of this evil artificial intelligence. Now the reptilians have their own subordinates. They have kind of foot soldier reptilians. They have overlord reptilians. They have what Stephen Greer refers to as programmable life forms, and these are the alien greys. And sort of involved or within the orbit of all of this are the various secret space program groups and offshoots that came out of this infiltration of the deep state as they sought to understand the alien technologies they'd recovered and take advice from these evil reptilians. This includes various forms of a secret space program, including a military-industrial complex secret space program, which is kind of the house league of the secret space program. They have kind of the most dinky kind of technology in terms of what they can do and where they can go. Then there's the Navy secret space program, which is a slightly more advanced secret space program with more advanced spacecraft that can really get you from here to Mars in a blink of an eye, according to many of the secret space program whistleblowers, including Corey Goode. Then there's the Reptilian Dark Fleet program, which is kind of an invention of Corey. It's sort of the very top need to know, in the know human agents sort of work with the reptilians in this fleet of spacecraft that look very reminiscent to the fleet that is employed by Palpatine's Empire. In the Star Wars fantasy world. So anyways, these Dark Fleet space armadas venture out into the galaxy and conquer worlds, and very evil. This is the space program that Corey claims he was recruited into. There's even an international corporate conglomerate, and these are all the corporations that know everything about the secret space program, and not only do they know about it, but they actively engage in trade with other alien species and have dark secrets such as a human slave trade, which include human slave colonies on Mars and other places in the solar system, and even outside of it in other star systems. Finally, we get to the ancient Martians, also known as the pre-Adamites. And the story here goes that there was once a super Earth, which the remnants of which are the asteroid belt that exists between Mars and Jupiter. And Mars was actually a moon of this giant super Earth. And there was some kind of war or accident, and the super Earth exploded, creating the asteroid belt, and its moon Mars got kind of damaged in the explosion and sent into a new orbit. What remained of these pre-Adamites who lived on this super Earth, the stories differ, but in one case, the moon was actually a spaceship that they took from Mars and they brought it to Earth, and then they all kind of went from the moon down to Earth and set up what became known as Atlantis in Antarctica. Other stories, are that the pre-Adamites didn't come from the moon, but they just came in spaceships, fleeing the destroyed Mars, super Earth, and that they crash landed in Antarctica and set up Atlantis there. And as the story goes, the Illuminati, also known as the Cabal, that banker that came out recently, he was a whistleblower giving away the goods about what happens at the highest levels of power. He claimed that only 8,500 people rule the world and that they get their power by sacrificing small children to Lucifer. Essentially, that's supposedly the Illuminati, and they see themselves as the descendants of these pre-Adamites, these ancient Martians, or at the very least, they are their sycophants. This covers kind of the totality of the information that I'm aware of that was already in extant, that already existed, that Corey relayed to David Wilcock on the show, Cosmic Disclosure on the Gaia channel. This is all information that he claimed to have gotten from the smart glass pads, the holographic iPads that are apparently issued to all of the semi-slaves that work in the Dark Fleet, so that they can find out everything they'd want to know about everything going on with the space program. Hey, why not? They're all going to have their memories wiped eventually anyway, right? But so now let's get into some of the things that Corey supposedly introduced that were new. The very top of the list would be the blue avians. Now, the blue avians are a species of alien that's never been described by anyone before. Corey's claim is that they came roaring into our solar system in around 2011. They have a technology that consists of small to large spheres, spheres as small as a school bus, all the way to the size of a moon, all the way to the size of Jupiter. And when they came in with these spheres, they put a lockdown on the solar system so that no one could get in and no one could get out. And they said they were here to guide humanity through its ascension. Apparently, they'd been here before. They'd screwed up big time, according to themselves, interacting directly with humankind and creating all kinds of problems, including evil religions and cults and terrible things. And apparently had learned their lesson and were back one last time to try and help us defeat the reptilians and take our true place on the cosmic stage as ascended fourth density beings. Oh yeah, densities. I guess this is the point at which I should explain the various densities. Apparently we are third density beings of the universe. The animals that we interact with are second density. Apparently a rock would be a first density. The fourth density are sort of these aliens that are right above us, people who have ascended to this utopian next stage of awareness and harmony. Then there's fifth density, sixth density, seventh density, eighth density. Apparently ninth density is when you become one with the universe, or maybe that's 10th. Where's all this density stuff coming from? Well, it comes from the Law of One. The Law of One is a book that was written by what I can only describe as a bunch of hippie psychics in the early 80s who felt they were channeling the words of a very wise alien who had come to give them very valuable knowledge, spiritual knowledge, technological knowledge. And it's a real big thing for David Wilcock. It's something he's always thumping, this Law of One. Law of One, and talking about the densities and that these blue avians were sixth density, that their blue spheres that seem to be related to them are actually seventh or eighth density living beings. And the idea was that these blue avians were the aliens that had communicated through channeling all of this esoteric information and spiritual information through the hippie psychics in the early 80s, which David Wilcock really became enamored with as, I guess, what he sees as some master key to the secrets of the universe. So that's the Blue Avians. Now, funny enough, the Blue Avians selected Corey Goode to be their ambassador to humankind and basically convey their message to us so that we would start to change from sort of negatively oriented or service to self, lost, poor souls into service to others, very positive souls. It sounds very nice. It's always a good message to hear someone say, you should be good to others and not so selfish. I think that's pretty common advice that we've heard from a lot of different religious and philosophical leaders throughout history. One of the first statements that Corey made on the Cosmic Disclosure show in reference to the Blue Avians and their instructions to him was that his prime directive is to make absolutely certain that he does not set himself up as some kind of religious leader or cult leader, that kind of spiritual movement that sort of pivots around one figure. That was his prime directive as stated by himself, I think right off the bat in the first or second episode of Cosmic Disclosure. But anyways, so the Blue Avians select Corey. Corey becomes their ambassador. Ambassador to what? Well, apparently there is a confederation of alien species. You might ask yourself, with all these alien species floating around, why don't they ever blow the crap out of each other? Well, there's a treaty, don't you know? And it's a treaty as part of the Confederation of Alien Species. The United Nations building for them is the moon, and they all meet there They have conferences. They discuss how things are going, resolve disputes, very much like the United Nations. And Corey is the blue avian representative to that entire body of aliens. So, very important post for Corey. And I think that pretty much summarizes the blue avians. Now, 6 to 9 months into his stint doing the Cosmic Disclosure Show on Gaia, Corey revealed an amazing new development. And that was that he had made direct contact with a new species of apparent fourth density beings, but only they weren't from outer space. What they told him was that they were from the inner Earth. Now, I'm including this in new stuff because of the details and where I suspect they come from, but it's not new to hear stories about an inner Earth or that there are people who live under ground in the inner Earth. As we all know, there's the classic journey to the center of the Earth. There's many other stories like that. But Corey's version of the inner Earth consists of a utopian society of ancient humans who, as communicated to Corey, had been around for millions of years. They represented past populations of humans that had ascended to fourth density as part of what David Wilcock describes as a regular 25,000 year cycle where the sun gives off this radiation burst and it burns all the bad people to a crisp. All the good people, they are transformed into these new bodies. For an explanation of that, see every doomsday chapter from pretty much every major religion of the past 2,000 years. But they are transformed and they get new bodies. They become fourth density. They start to have psychic powers. And if they work hard enough and practice enough, they can levitate things and do all kinds of amazing things. It represents a new chapter in a species development. And so these inner Earth people, which consist of various races, and they also are divided up into castes. There's a priest caste, there's like a science caste, there's an administrative caste, a worker caste, and they had decided that they too wanted Corey's help in this ongoing saga of good against evil. And so they gave him a tour of their underground utopian cities, and they gave him access to all the information they had about the inner Earth, revelations of various other inner Earth species of humanoids and reptilians. And I really got to take a moment here to stop, because with the revelation of the inner Earth reptilians, I got to say that in Corey Goode's world, there are a crapload of different reptilians. I mean, let's just quickly look at them. There's overlord reptilians from outer space. There's their foot soldiers. Then there are the programmable life forms that they use as kind of errand boys. And then in the inner Earth, there's reptilians that look pretty much like raptors, like dinosaurs. There's reptilians that look like reptilian cavemen. There's even reptilians ripped straight out of M. Night Shyamalan's movie Signs. Every kind of reptilian you could probably conceive of is represented in this world. The inner Earth humanoid people, the elves, I like to think of them as elves, they use, according to Corey, cigar-shaped anti-gravity craft that can phase through solid rock. And, Corey communicates with a priestess named Kari directly when she portals him to the underground city for a powwow, or simply through what I can only describe as a telepathic Skype call, where Corey uses his powers as an intuitive empath to make contact telepathically with Kari. They have a little conference and then go on with their day. The term Corey uses to describe the inner Earth people who are very reminiscent of Tolkien's elves is, he calls them the Anshar. That's apparently the name they call themselves. It's their race. And he also reveals that the Anshar are the same beings as the Nordics. So these are all the same people. And he also claims that there are fake Nordics out there, people who seem to be Nordics, but they're actually working for the reptilians. You can tell because they have 6 fingers. So keep an eye out for those 6 fingers. Any of you people out there that think you're on the verge of being fooled by a fake Nordic Anshar. Now, the Mayans are another alien race which Corey claims live close by in terms of galactic distance, and share over 90% of their DNA with human beings. The story goes that these Mayans rebelled against the reptilians themselves very recently and ascended to fourth density. And it's only been a few generations since that occurred. These Mayans are supposed to have lifespans that are about 300 years. The implication here is that some of the South American civilizations were worshiping these guys who had come to Earth to kind of escape the turmoil in the war against the reptilians that was occurring back where they live. And when that was all resolved, they left Earth and went back home. And those civilizations apparently obviously collapsed, not having their gods anymore to worship. That's the implication. It's never explicitly stated, but that's sort of what he's implying. Anyways, these Mayans are very interested in Earth. They watch our entertainment, listen to our radio, are very concerned about our future. And it was these friendly Mayan aliens that came to Corey's aid when he was flooded with traumatic memories of his time in the secret space program. And they wiped a good portion, according to Corey, of these dark memories so that he could function normally and proceed with his mission of saving mankind. Finally, the last component of all of this is the Cabal and the Alliance. So what is the Cabal? The Cabal are the Illuminati, the reptilians that they report to, all of the sycophants that supposedly report to the Illuminati, and all of their evil plans and all of the evil things that they have been working towards for the enslavement of mankind and their own profit. Now, the Alliance is supposedly a more recent group which has emerged, broken away, turned in rebellion against the Cabal. And the Alliance also consists of various governments and government players, corporate players, people who have woken up and realized that what they've been involved with has been something evil. They've decided to join the good guys. They've developed their own secret space program, their own craft, and they stand in opposition to the Cabal. And what Corey will do and what David will do is they will try and incorporate real-world political and social events into this paradigm of the Cabal versus the Alliance. And they've described everything from high espionage type intrigue to underground battles going on, where Canadian Marines, by the way, there are no Canadian Marines, but anyways, Canadian Marines have been sent secretly into underground bases controlled by the Cabal to basically wipe out all the bad guys and even some of the aliens down there. Some of these soldiers supposedly so traumatized that they've gone crazy, and that this accounts for a lot of the underground booms that people hear, as well as obviously the intense tunneling that's been going on underground as the Cabal and their reptilian overlords have been tunneling out bunkers for all of the super rich evil people to retreat to when they unleash their plans for world destruction. So, I'm out of breath. It's a lot to try and convey in a short period of time. I think that pretty much covers everything that Corey has claimed is going on. It's just a good kind of background and template for you to begin with before I get into everything that's wrong and that has been going wrong with this secret space program, Whistleblower, almost right from the beginning. You might have recognized some terms as I generally relayed the story that Corey Goode has told on the Cosmic Disclosure TV show. Terms like a secret space program and breakaway civilization are certainly not new to ufology and not the invention of Corey Goode. In fact, a lot of what Corey Goode seems to use as the foundation, especially for the government conspiracy stuff, is the work of Richard Dolan. Now, Richard Dolan is a very level-headed and skeptical UFO researcher. He is a historian, and when he began looking at this field, he didn't believe at all that it was possible for there to be grand government conspiracies. especially dealing with secret anti-gravity craft, technologies that would benefit mankind but had been withheld, possible interactions with alien species, the idea of a breakaway civilization that could exist apart from the rest of us and have quite a different existence from the rest of us. But these were ideas that Richard developed over time as he continued his research into UFO sightings and the stories that various people had brought forward, people who had had abduction experiences, and especially the testimony of very credible witnesses such as pilots, government officials, military officers. Richard has come to very tentative conclusions. He'll rate various types of evidence according to the probability that he believes it's genuine, and formulate very reserved hypotheses of what could possibly be going on, and really do the responsible work of a researcher in this field. And Corey will take all of that work and use it as a platform upon which he places this ludicrous cartoon, this Scooby-Doo story of the blue avians and the inner Earth Anshar, and trying to pull in as many threads from as many other themes and classic secret alien conspiracy storylines that have existed out there for years, and trying to weave it all together and anchor it with Richard Dolan's terminology. Even people who are familiar with the UFO research field were initially drawn in by Corey in the early days of his cosmic disclosure testimony because he used many of the same terms as Richard Dolan. So while Richard has always been someone obviously on the outside trying to look into something and come up with credible and careful theories and hypotheses about what might be going on, the initial excitement and lure, of course, was the idea that Corey was someone from the inside who was finally revealing the actual true and genuine detail from within these programs. And when his testimony first began, besides the unusual inclusion of this race, the Blue Avians, and his initial claims about the nature of his relationship with them, everything else that he was relaying was blending rational and solid UFO research with well-established sensational stories that have been put forth in the past, and then blending in his own cartoon with him in the leading role. Now, when I say he's doing this, I mean, I'm not absolutely saying that Corey has definitely planned out and executed every stage and every little detail of his story to unfold in the way that it's come out to us. It certainly looks like that's the case, but I can't be sure of that, so I don't have any absolute evidence showing that. And as I get to the end of this video, I have a few different ideas for what precisely could be going on. All I'm saying is that it's very obvious that this entire narrative has been very, I would say, clumsily constructed, but what it uses for a lot of its credibility is this underlying foundation of solid work that's been done by very credible people such as Richard Dolan. Let me take you through how a typical cosmic disclosure episode unfolds. There are basically two formats, and I'll go through both of them. The first main format for the show is with Corey Goode sitting on the left and David Wilcock sitting on the right. David will ask Corey questions or prompt him with certain subjects, and then Corey will talk for a little while. And what always happens is that David will interject at certain points, and he will listen to something that Corey says and then say, aha, I have also heard this information from my other secret space program sources. And one of the ones he references most frequently is someone named Pete Peterson. And so David will say, this is an amazing correlation. You are telling me this detail, and I also heard this detail from another source. And this is presented as amazing evidence that, Corey's account carries some kind of credible weight. That's one format. The other format is where they bring a guest in to the show. The guest sits in between Corey and David, and the guest tells their story, gives their account, presents whatever they think is their evidence, And then David will turn to Corey and say, so Corey, how does this match up with what you understand? And then Corey will sit there as kind of an implied arbiter of truth and comment on how closely what the guest has presented matches with his own understanding of reality. So you can see right off the bat there are some serious issues with this way of vetting information. If you don't know who David Wilcock is, you might recognize him from the show Ancient Aliens. And he's a frequent guest and speaker on that show. And like a lot of the guests who speak on that show, David is an affable, seems like a very friendly man, but he is a walking X-Files poster. You know the poster that is up on the wall behind Mulder's desk, I want to believe? Well, David very much wants to believe. And when you want very badly to believe, you fall into a trap that's known as confirmation bias. And it's pretty clear, and I think David would probably admit this himself, that what David really wants to believe is that our solar system and every star in the galaxy goes through regular cycles of cataclysm that destroy all of the evil people on all of the planets within the solar system and raise all of the good people to a new reality, a new utopian awareness, a new chapter in the development of their species. First of all, there's absolutely nothing to suggest that information that a anonymous or not anonymous secret space program whistleblower has conveyed to David has not also been conveyed by that same person to other people, posted on forums. It really doesn't matter whether they're anonymous or not. David's certainty that he retains information that has only been provided to him is highly questionable. And then, of course, there's the fact that it would be perfectly reasonable for two people or a group of people to all be accessing a similar store of information and all spinning their own stories. It's inevitable that some information that is told to an aggregate figure like David Wilcock by one person would be told to him by another person. It's not an indication of anything, and it doesn't confirm the credibility of anything. You may be wondering how the universe determines exactly who is a good person and who is a bad person. Well, David Wilcock explains that his decoding of the law of one shows that there is a universal service to others power meter that must hit 51% before the sun triggers ascension. And Corey has confirmed this through the blue Avians.
And the battle continues! You win!
I've chosen an interesting way to convey this concept to you, but I'm not exaggerating. This is not a joke. David Wilcock and Corey Goode assure their followers that there is a service to others power meter that must reach 51% if a person is to ascend to the fourth density bonus round when the sun gives off its ascension solar flash. Now, the blue Avians understand how this rating system works, how the judgment is made as to whether something is service to others or service to self, but they've explained it to Corey and the rest of us in terms we can understand. One of the things you quickly begin to notice is how much of the detail in Corey Goode's accounts seem to be drawn from existing fantasy works and films. There's a lot of stuff borrowed from, in terms of the metaphysical, from Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings. There are characters that seem to be pulled straight out of Tolkien's universe. And even some of the ships, for example, the Dark Fleet motherships, essentially look like Star Destroyers. And if you challenge David Wilcock with this kind of information, his response is that all of these movies and all of these stories are a kind of partial disclosure where the motive is either to put the information out there in a fictional form so that if down the line certain people who are in the know reveal classified information, the authorities and the community at large will simply say, oh, that's from that movie. You stole it from that movie. That's not real. And then the other kind of partial disclosure he claims is where members of the alliance who have managed to infiltrate Hollywood are inserting actual disclosure for the benefit of everyone if you just look closely and pay attention. And he would cite, for example, Captain America Winter Soldier as an example of that. But it's obviously much more likely that certain so-called whistleblowers or people who claim to have incredible knowledge were unconsciously or quite consciously influenced by certain depictions in film and fantasy. From what I can see, that certainly appears to have been the case with the Law of One book, which, as I mentioned before, was supposedly channeled by so-called psychic hippies in the early 80s and describes a metaphysical reality that's pulled straight out of the plot of Star Wars, which was at the height of its initial hype at the time. The Law of One book quotes from the Infancy Gospel of Thomas, which is an apocryphal book of the Bible that has been thoroughly discredited as a fraud. Although I'm open to the idea that it could be legitimate. But the point here is these are the types of influences that would have an impact on hippies in the early 80s who are searching for hidden knowledge, looking in places outside the lines for hidden wisdom, then laying down, putting themselves into a trance, and believing they're channeling the wise words of an alien being, when in fact what they are doing is dictating their own subconscious to a person who is listening and writing it all down. But the unfortunate effect of having David Wilcock sit there and act as though he is kind of a sober, impartial arbiter of information, confirming that which is true and discarding that which is false, it can give people who may not be particularly discerning or familiar with this field, this impression that they are receiving amazing and confirmed what David would call quote unquote intelligence about the secret space program and alien conspiracy cover-ups. And this is very unfortunate because it contributes greatly to the false impression that there's some real meat here. The real tragedy about all of this is that there are genuine UFO and alien researchers that come into that show. They sometimes present intriguing evidence, and all of that evidence and everything that they say is tainted by the format and the characters involved, the way that they handle the information, and the claims that they make. If there is any real truth or meat in any of what these people who come onto the show are saying, it is lost deep down a hole of confirmation bias and wishful thinking. It makes sort of the entire endeavor a lost cause for researchers. Now, although there are all kinds of different people who can get sucked into the Corey Goode vortex, I think I want to focus in on two main kinds of people I've noticed who tend to get drawn into this. The first are people who are very open and searching for answers, but unguarded. And a very typical example of this is somebody who's recently discarded a rigid dogmatic belief system that might be theist or atheist. A lot of people find at a certain point in their lives they've been adhering to a very absolutist, materialist doctrine, and they'll discard that and go searching for new answers. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing that. I think everyone goes through a kind of evolution throughout their life. But one of the dangers of that is when you open yourself up. If you also drop your guard entirely, you become susceptible to being drawn into false movements, cynical, opportunistic ploys designed to exploit people and take advantage of their good nature. I think the other type, which is not as common, but certainly a type I've noticed, are the kind of opportunistic, cynical types that want to hitch their wagon to the rising Corey Goode train. Now, what are Corey's kids? Well, Corey's kids are apparently a small group of young people who very early on announced their devotion and commitment to Corey, his message, his story, and his mission. Now, there's been some disagreement over who came up with the term Corey's kids. A few days ago, one of the Corey's kids came out and said that they did not come up with that term. It was the first time I've ever seen one of them say that. Apparently, the claim is that the dark journalist invented that term. But regardless of where it came from, it does very well describe the group of young people that have decided to devote themselves or attach themselves to the Corey Goode movement. But I want to focus in on two of the main key members of the Corey's Kids group, and they are Jordan Sather, who has a YouTube channel called Destroying the Illusion, and Teresa Yanaros, aka Tessa Gianni, who has a YouTube channel called Divine Frequency. And I choose them because I think they're excellent examples of both types of people. And I'm going to start with Jordan. Now, let me just make this clear. Everything I'm about to say about Jordan is my opinion, but I really don't need to say too much. All I think I really need to do is encourage you to go to his YouTube channel and watch any random 3 videos he's uploaded in the last month. Try and watch them from beginning to end and tell me if you don't think that this is someone that strikes you as an opportunistic narcissist who is hoping to hitch his brand, which is something he cites quite frequently, his brand, to the Corey Goode brand and marketing campaign in the hopes that this will bring him success and noteworthiness. Now, the other person that's kind of a key figure of the Corey's Kids is Teresa Yanaros. Now, I think Teresa is a great example of the more common type of person who gets sucked into the Corey Goode black hole, which is somebody who is recently let go of a kind of a rigid system of belief and is kind of open and exploring and trying to learn new things, but is quite clearly also completely unguarded in their discernment. And I think Teresa is a great example of this. If you go to her YouTube channel, what you'll notice is that approximately 7 or 8 months ago, you have videos uploaded by a completely different person. And what you might take note of is that the last video that was uploaded before a 7 or 8 month hiatus was a video titled 5 Signs That You're Not Being Your Authentic Self. Now, at the time that video was uploaded, the owner of the YouTube channel called herself Tessa Gianni. That person then disappeared for 7 to 8 months. I think a really great way to tell if somebody might have gotten sucked into something that has taken hold of them and they're not aware of what's happened is somebody who posts a YouTube video titled 5 Signs You're Not Being Your Authentic Self, and then 7 months or 8 months later returns to YouTube with a different name, different style, a different personality, and a different hair color. And I guess, if I were to add a 5th thing, joining a cult would be at the top of the list. So what concerns me about this is I think Teresa is a great example of sort of what's happening to many individuals who are becoming enamored with the Corey Goode story. There is a celebration of having all of the answers. There is a feeling of being on a track towards secret truths, with secret truths being revealed. There's a tendency to accept pretty much whatever is presented to you as truth. And, I'll give a great example. Teresa uploaded some videos when she went to the ESETI conference. And I have three separate people from that conference talking about how they totally tripped out, man, while they were sitting in a field gazing off towards Mount Adams.
Trip on this, right? There's hundreds of people here right now. And last night we saw all kinds of crazy things. Now, but I did see this gray smudge orb thing. Well, we all saw it last night, but it was about 50 feet in diameter. It was kind of flat, like the orbs you see in photographs, but it was giant, right? And I'm sitting back there in the chairs with everybody. It's about 11 o'clock last night. But if you look here and you see the break in the trees right there, it came out of there in a curve like this, gray orb, right there. And so I'm sitting in the trees and I see this. It goes on for about 5 seconds, and I'm watching it and I'm thinking, that is a trip. There's a gray orb. And then somebody sitting behind me goes, is anybody watching that gray orb? And I spin around. I'm like, it's real. It's not my imagination, because I was tripping.
Well, they were totally tripped out, dude. They saw what they thought might have been alien spacecraft flying around, passing overhead. But when you're tripping out, who knows what that looks like? And I think what you'll find is that the Corey Goode marketing campaign, the thrust of it is geared towards a kind of exploratory young demographic that's desperately in search of meaning, exploring altered states of consciousness, into veganism. That's sort of where all of his messages is kind of been projected. And you can see it working. As people who are already inclined towards that way of being very, very much seem to be flocking towards the Corey Goode story. Now, when Teresa uploaded a video talking about all of the spacecraft that she had seen and how many of the people at ESETI had watched in amazement as a giant door had opened on the side of Mount Adams, which they immediately believed was a door, and was not only a door, but a door that had been opened by the inner Earth on Shar to kind of wave hello at all of them as they tripped out in a field, to indicate that, yes, they know they're there, and yes, they're all together in solidarity. Now, I made a very straightforward comment regarding that upload in the comment section. I simply said that I looked forward to all of the video footage of the spacecraft from ESETI, and that I also looked forward to the exploration of the giant door in the side of the mountain, and asked when that might be made available, and said thank you. Now, the response I got was very defensive. I was accused of having posted a comment that was dripping with sarcasm. And I can say that, it might have had a few dabs of sarcasm in it, but the questions were sincere. If you're going to go on YouTube as a representative of the Sphere Being Alliance and Corey Goode movement, and claim to be seeing spacecraft flying around Mount Adams and giant doors opening on the side of the mountain, it's probably a good idea to come with some actual evidence of that, rather than simply recounting what people experienced the night before as they were tripping out, while showing video of what appears to be a shadow on the side of the mountain cast by sunlight. Now, we had a back and forth over email. Teresa admonished me for not having simply gone on to Google and done a Google search of UFO sightings around Mount Adams, and supplied me with a link to one such video, which I took a look at and immediately discerned to be a mistake, perhaps not necessarily a hoax. People can make mistakes. They can still operate a camera, but maybe they're not seeing what they think they're seeing. Or it could have been a hoax, but it was obviously fake and not a UFO. I forwarded it to Kyle, UFO Proof, who has a much more detailed analysis. And I pointed this out to Teresa, this was not real. And her response was that it was simply one example of what could be found on Google, and that I could go onto Google and find additional examples. Now, I think we all know that we can all go onto Google and find a lot of examples of hoax UFO videos. I don't think that's the point that we're trying to get to here. I think the point is that for people who really want to find out what's actually going on, whatever that is, with the UFO phenomenon, that it's so important to demand evidence, to be skeptical, and to really challenge people who make claims without evidence. And now we come to what I feel is one of the strongest pieces of evidence suggesting that the entire story from Corey is fabrication. And that is a long interview with Corey Goode's wife, Stacy Goode. And it was conducted by Teresa Llaneros of the Divine Frequency YouTube channel, who I have previously mentioned. So when you watch this interview, and we'll put the link in the description below, Corey Goode's wife, through all of this, through all of these things that have happened, has not had a single direct experience with anything even resembling remotely evidence that that Corey's story is true. And I know a lot of people want to search for signs of corroboration and correlation to bolster Corey's story, and you would think an interview with his wife would be the place where that would happen, and in fact the opposite occurs. So every single piece of supposed corroborating evidence that she states is something that she actually has no direct memory of, but which is something that Corey tells her has occurred to her prior to her memory being wiped. So every major interaction with an alien being, abductions, pretty much everything that Corey's wife claims has happened to her, all of this information has been relayed to her, and to her solely by Corey Goode, her husband, because her memory in every case has been wiped, either out of mercy because the experience was so traumatic, or out of malevolence because they were abducted by the bad guys and they wanted to erase the evidence. The things that she has actually witnessed herself have been incredibly mundane. I'll give you an example. She tells a story about going out into the backyard and seeing 3 triangular depressions in the ground, indicating that a heavy craft possibly has landed in the backyard. And she goes running into the house and grabs Corey and says, "Look, come and look at this. Look at these depressions in the ground. What is this?" And then Corey informs her, "Oh, right. Yes, last night I was abducted by the military industrial complex secret space program. They filled me full of drugs and interrogated me for hours before bringing me back and landing their spacecraft back in the backyard. And I just kind of went to bed." I was going to mention it. Some people are highly suggestible. I've met them, and it's hard to put yourself in their place when you can't imagine yourself being that susceptible. Throughout the interview, Stacy Goode offers no corroboration whatsoever, but turns out to be just another echo point, giving Corey's story seeming legitimacy. Over the last few months, a number of people have come out to challenge the Corey Goode movement, the Sphere Being Alliance paradigm, as it has begun to grow exponentially. And one of these critics is a gentleman who calls himself the Dark Journalist. I just wanted to bring up the Dark Journalist because he has leveled some very valid criticisms of Corey Goode. The fact that this looks like a cynical marketing campaign, it appears to be targeted at vulnerable type people. It does not jive with the basic concepts of evidence and journalistic research. These are all valid criticisms, and the Dark Journalist has done some interesting interviews, but I just want to point out that he has also engaged in some very unjournalistic tactics in his pursuit of Corey Goode, one of which was to take a former Corey's kid who had just been kind of excluded from a meeting of the inner circle, and there may also have been issues of jealousy involving another Corey's kid. and a relationship. In any case, this very jaded individual was brought on to the Dark Journalist's channel on YouTube and interviewed. And it's from this guy that a lot of the charges of Satanism have emerged. It was pretty clear to me watching the interview that this gentleman, the Dark Journalist was interviewing, was jaded, angry, in a dark place, and looking to lash out and hurt not just Corey Goode, but his former Corey's kids' friends. And so I would just caution, one of the things we don't want to do as we expose the real damage that this Corey Goode movement is doing to ufology is to engage in dishonest or unjournalistic tactics like that. You got to make sure that the person that you're talking to is someone who doesn't have a motive to say some things that might smear the person that you are seeking to expose. One of the interesting points raised is that Corey Goode's choice for illustrator appears to have been involved at some point with Satanism, or at least have been involved in a satanic heavy metal band. And one of the things that's given as evidence of this is the fact that in his illustration of the blue avian, the blue avian appears to be standing there throwing up some kind of satanic gang sign. But overall, this Satanism stuff strikes me as a distraction. I should probably stop here and answer the question anyone who has not previously been familiar with this information would be asking right now, which is, why wouldn't Corey simply record one of his many transportations or teleportations or abductions that are ongoing, which he reports to David Wilcock on a regular basis? Well, his answer is not particularly surprising, that to procure evidence of his involvement with these various aliens or even the secret space program would violate the dogma and doctrine of the law of one, which has as its prime directive non-interference. And not interfering means not interfering with free will. But lo and behold, these various alien races are permitted to communicate using Corey Goode as a conduit, because Corey is a special case. Someone who's already been brought into the Middle Earth and space by those evil reptilians and their evil henchmen via his 20 and back excursions. How very convenient this is for everyone involved. So let me make this clear. Corey is telling those who want to believe his story that they aren't going to get any actual evidence from him. He implores his loyal following to essentially have faith in him and stay the course as laid out by the doctrine of the law of one, a universal religion that trumps all others. If they do this, they will all find salvation through ascension. In every case, Corey Goode is the central figure around which all of these ideas pivot. Everything in Corey's described world depends on whether or not he can convince the global human community to put their faith in him and his message. So how come I know so much about what Corey Goode has revealed on the Cosmic Disclosure television program? Well, like many people, I watched initially because it was something new, so why not check it out? And also because it used a lot of Dolan's terminology, which made it seem like it could have some grounding and plausibility. However, I quickly grew irritated with David Wilcock's idea of correlation, his constant references to synchronicities, and his frequent thumping of the law of one book, not to mention his ridiculous assertion that everyone has a service to others power meter that must reach a certain percentage if we'd all like to go to heaven. It's one of the more childish interpretations of the golden rule I've ever heard. But I kept watching with renewed interest after the introduction of the Inner Earth and Shar people. You know, those ancestors of humankind that have ascended to fourth density and consist of various castes: a priest caste, a science caste, a worker caste, administrative caste, people who are very peaceful and live blissful lives. And I forgot to mention before that they place a high value on virginity, they live a very long time, and they drive around in cigar-shaped anti-gravity craft. Those people. Well, I've been waiting impatiently for Corey to announce that the Anshar have revealed to him that they are not ancestors of human beings from the past, but descendants of human beings from the future, who have come back to help us secure the timeline and shepherd us into our ascension. For over a year, I have strongly suspected that Corey would switch up this detail, that he would change the Anshar from human ancestors to human descendants. And the reason why I've had this very strong prediction is because I'm familiar with a book called Chronicles from the Future, Valley of the Roses. In 1921, a man named Paul Amadeus Dianek, a Swiss-Australian teacher with fragile health, fell into a coma, a year-long coma. And during this time, he reported that his consciousness slid into the future and entered the body of another man. And the date was 3906 AD. Now, the society he describes in this future time is identical to the Anshar, identical in pretty much every way. They have the same caste system. They place a very high value on virginity. They live long, peaceful, and very blissful lives. And they fly around in cigar-shaped anti-gravity craft. Even the clothing used in the illustrations for the translated version of Mr. Dianek's diary/book are almost identical to illustrations that Corey has had commissioned of his Mayans. Now, I want to clarify that I'm not saying that I believe that Mr. Paul Amadeus Dianek went into the future, that his consciousness was projected into the future. In fact, there's a very good argument that what he experienced was some kind of coma-induced lucid dream state. A lot of the details seem to suggest that before he went into the coma, he had recently lost the love of his life to an illness. And while he was in the coma, when he went into the future, who did he meet in the future? Well, the reincarnation of his lost love, where he spent a year with her before waking up from the coma, his consciousness having been transported back to his original starting point. But the interesting thing about the book is the way it describes future technology is not your typical 1920s vision of the future. It's not all cogs and metal and wheels and people being propelled along sidewalks by conveyor belts. It's actually plausible technology that could be extrapolated from what we have today, including holographic like iPad technology, the anti-gravity craft I mentioned, the abundance of resources. There's telepathy, just as with the Anshar, and many other details that one could imagine in some science fiction movie being presented as our future, and people would not balk at it. They would not find it particularly unbelievable because it seems to extend naturally as a projection of our current technology, minus, of course, the telepathy stuff. But the reason that I knew that Corey Goode would eventually reveal that the Anshar were human descendants and not human ancestors was because I've already read the book. And I suppose Corey felt, or whoever's been feeding Corey this information, that it would be too obvious that this detail had been drawn from a book that was only translated into English in 2013 if the Anshar were presented as human descendants. So there had to be some kind of twist, so they were presented as human ancestors. And now with this shift, I have very little doubt that both Corey and David will claim that the Chronicles from the Future, Valley of the Roses book is another amazing correlation, when all it really is an indication that more detail of Corey's story has been lifted from existing sources. There is an excellent video synopsis of the translated version of the diary/book on YouTube, and we'll put the link in the description below. The author who translated the book goes into quite a lot of detail about the various aspects of this society, how they get around, and just from watching that video you can see quite clearly that the details are pretty much identical to Corey's description of the Anshar. Corresponding roughly with the taping of the Intel update where Corey revealed the Anshar are actually our descendants, David Wilcock essentially dropped off the face of the earth. He didn't provide any updates to his webpage. He made no tweets. and essentially no one heard from him for about a month and a half, until August 4th, when he tweeted that he was working on a personal update to explain why he had gone offline for so long. I'm sure that not very many people realize that David Wilcock's theories about ascension have been largely anchored over the past 2 years by Corey's description of the Anshar being our ancestors. David, frequently on his sister show on the Gaia Network, Wisdom Teachings, will reference Corey Goode and say, look, here's proof that past human ancestors have gone through these cycles of ascension and risen to fourth density. And although it's hard to read people during something like a cosmic disclosure episode where there's plenty of time for everyone to pull themselves together, I couldn't help but feel that as Corey Goode revealed this sudden twist, that the Anshar were actually our descendants and not our ancestors, that David had a difficult time not showing the shock on his face. The implications to his ascension theories are obvious. David's ascension theories, which were so heavily anchored by Corey's story about the Anshar, which David very much believed was real, are now rendered somewhat comical by the fact that the anchor that he was using has turned out to have been a complete fabrication, as admitted by his source. Now, this is the embarrassing thing that can happen to somebody when they fall into the trap of confirmation bias and accepting people's stories as though they are evidence. And for the Cosmic Disclosure series, there was on July 11th an episode of Question and Answers, which is filler, really. And then the following week's episode featured Pete Peterson with Corey's name taken off the title for that episode. The following week again featured the other secret space program whistleblower, Pete Peterson, again with Corey's name not in the marketing splash for that episode. And this leads me to July 25th, when Teresa Yanaros of Divine Frequency did an interview with Corey Goode, where Corey responded to all of the criticisms and the demands for evidence. One of the interesting things that he did was go out of his way to make a point of saying that he is in daily communication with David and that David has his back. But we've only heard that from Corey, and all other evidence suggests a departure between Corey and David. Corey spins it like he was only ever contracted to do 50 episodes of Cosmic Disclosure, despite the fact that he and David are both founders of that program, and that he's going off now to do his own things, and he may return from time to time to provide additional intel updates on Cosmic Disclosure. Let's get into this over 2-hour long interview where Corey responds to all of the criticism that has been leveled against him. First of all, most of the focus during the interview is understandably on the overreaching charges made by the dark journalist, mainly the Satanism stuff. This is an easy charge to respond to and dismiss because it is based on the flimsiest of evidence, and at least half the interview seems to be spent on the bogus Satanism charge and related topics. All of the criticism that's covered during the interview is framed as having come from the dark journalist, and all of the responses Corey makes are basically the same. That all of the criticism leveled against him is a plot by Project Avalon and Bill Ryan to discredit Corey. Again and again, regardless of the criticism or where it originated from, though mostly it's presented as having come from the dark journalist, which is false, the response is that it's a conspiracy by Project Avalon. Corey's focus seems to be completely on the idea that Project Avalon is conspiring against him. With no evidence, he claims they harassed his family so that he had to move. In many of his responses, Corey Goode promotes claims against Bill Ryan, the administrator of Project Avalon, that are very character damaging. Goode even starts talking about Bill Ryan's marriage and says very personal and defamatory things about Ryan, while admitting his information comes from no one he can identify. I heard so much about Project Avalon that I had to go and check it out myself. And about halfway through making this video, I did so. And the first thing that struck me about these forums was the degree of scrutiny that's applied to people who come on to those forums and make wide-eyed, sensational claims. The administrators there and the other participants will politely but insistently press for evidence. They don't just accept any story. So what I got from Project Avalon was that they are very skeptical and challenging to people who come with stories but have no evidence to back up their stories. And it became pretty clear to me, based on looking at the Project Avalon forums and then looking at Corey's response to his criticism in this interview, that, and this is my opinion, what Corey dislikes most about Project Avalon is the fact that they weren't willing to just simply believe his story without evidence. Now, during the interview, all of Corey's attacks against Bill Ryan and the claims about the Project Avalon conspiracy against him are delivered with what to me seems like an unhealthy looking expression of relish. At several points, Corey looks directly into the camera as though he's addressing his thousands of followers directly. Corey also implies several times that anyone who challenges him, which I must assume includes those who demand evidence for his claims, is a sociopath or Nazi that is going crazy because our planet is being hit by strange energies from intergalactic space. Corey also says he and his supporters have been bombarded by what he calls energetic attacks from people hiding in closets, sticking pins into voodoo dolls. I'm not making this up. Corey appears to be addressing his diehard followers directly in the manner of a cult leader throughout his responses. Watching the interview, it felt like with Corey Goode, we've suddenly moved from what was merely largely silly into genuinely creepy territory. Corey says he's just a regular guy who's been fortunate enough to be filled with love and light from the blue Avians and elf-like Anshar, and he only wants to love others and be loved by others. This is also the standard line given by most modern cult leaders. I'm not precisely certain how a person who is filled with love and light is supposed to behave, but I am certain what I saw in that interview is definitely not it. And at this point, we really need to talk about news reporting, journalism ethics, and interviewing a subject. Now, Teresa Yanaros calls herself a journalist, and the confusion is understandable. There are full adults living today who have never or hardly been exposed to actual journalism. It's been almost 2 decades since television journalism discarded anything that remained of its ethical duty for partisan propaganda, and a decade since most major newspapers of any real note followed suit completely. The very definition of a competent journalist is someone who takes their political, religious, and anecdotal bias and compartmentalizes them, pushing them far away from their work, and then focusing on digging, probing, and verifying with the aim of finding out what's actually going on. This is what was drilled into me at Carleton University's School of Journalism, from which I graduated with honors in 1999. So Teresa can possibly be forgiven if she has never been exposed to the concepts behind ethical journalism and news reporting. So of course, Teresa doesn't follow the classic interview style of a serious reporter interviewing a controversial source. In fact, most of what Teresa does is not ask pointed questions, but simply present various topics followed by, "Can you comment on that?" At which point, Corey offers a ludicrous or deflective response, and Teresa accepts the answer at face value. During the interview, Teresa asks no real challenging, probing, or follow-up questions, such as comparing Corey's answers against existing information that would prove he was being incomplete in his response, if not deliberately deceptive. One example is the Linda Moulton Howe controversy. At the recent Contact in the Desert event, Linda Moulton Howe's name appeared on posters placed around the event, advertising a new book to be written also by Corey Goode and devoted follower Jordan Sather. When this was brought to her attention, Linda sent a message clarifying that she had nothing to do with the book and stating that she didn't understand why her name was associated with it. Teresa raises the topic during the interview, and Corey's response is demonstrably misleading. Corey claims that he and Jordan were consulting informally with Linda Howe, and her name was accidentally added to a single slide, which he didn't notice until his presentation. Unfortunately, His co-author for the upcoming book, Jordan Sather himself, posted a YouTube video where he complained that his upcoming book with Corey Goode wasn't getting the attention it deserved, especially considering the inclusion of big names on the posters advertising it at Contact in the Desert, such as Linda Moulton Howe, and how this was apparently evidence of a deliberate conspiracy to suppress Jordan Sather's brand.
But anyway, it's very interesting that they didn't want to say that I was working with all those other names on this project. I mean, Dr. Bob Wood is a physicist that went to Cornell, and he worked at Douglas for 34 years. Yeah, there's a reason that he didn't want to say those other names, is because it gives a lot of freaking credence to this project. And also, one of the other names that was up on that board mentioned at Contact in the Desert was none other than Linda Moulton Howe.
That guy talks a lot about his brand. But the most important question, really the only one that matters, evidence, is never addressed directly. Teresa touches it lightly when she gives Corey a platform to address the criticism that his story and information have no journalism or research value. Corey's response to this is to throw his hands up and say, what is journalism anyway? Isn't it just listening to someone's story and reporting it to others? Well, I can answer that question, and the answer is no. That's not journalism at all. That's what a publicist does. A public relations spokesperson, a media relations agent. That's their job, and Teresa appears to be a volunteer publicist for Corey Goode. And frankly, I think she should be paid for her work. And she thinks she's a journalist, but like I said, she can be forgiven if there's confusion there. Now, Corey explains that whatever we collectively decide together is real becomes the new reality. He calls it our co-creative capabilities. Essentially, Corey uses New Age gibber speak to walk around the reality that his story has no journalistic value, while simultaneously implying that even if it isn't true, we could all make it true if we just all join together and wish hard enough. So the biggest question of all is never really asked directly, the question of evidence. So let's get into the question of where are all of the charges and criticism and demand for evidence coming from? Well, I can tell you they're definitely not all coming from the dark journalist. He's the guy who's been aggregating all of the charges and criticisms against Corey, most predominantly put out in front as the lead. And in this video, I have clearly called him out for creating this stupid Satanism distraction by using a bad source and flimsy evidence. I've skimmed through the Dark Journalist catalog, however, to make this video, and watching some of his interviews and skimming others, and although I would employ a less egocentric style, and maybe that's required to make a career out of journalism and ufology, I don't know, his interviews are pretty well done. He really explores as much as he can with an interview subject, and he knows how to interject interesting angles into the discussion. But besides the Dark Journalist and the various parties he's interviewed about Corey Goode, we've also heard from Linda Howe regarding unauthorized use of her name for apparent cynical marketing purposes. And Richard Dolan has also interviewed Bill Ryan on the specific topic of so-called SSP whistleblowers who come at us with wide-eyed tales and zero evidence. Now, Dolan and Ryan appear to be in complete agreement that what appears to have happened is that Dolan's well-researched and grounded work on this topic, which offers logical arguments and speculations on the UFO phenomenon based on all available documents, witness testimony, and circumstantial evidence, that this work has been used as a foundation to support a space fantasy cult/entertainment franchise, with Corey Goode as the central figure and executive producer. Now, how anyone can look at this and not clearly see it should be mind-blowing, but I guess I'm getting old and I'm not so surprised anymore. This observation that Corey's story is nothing more than a giant shit show is being made by people both within and completely outside of ufology. In fact, Richard Dolan has been warning about this for years. Go watch an interview Dolan did with the Dark Journalist back in 2013, long before anyone knew of a Corey Goode. It's on YouTube. And in it, they discuss the growing issue of esoteric New Age religious influences on ufology and how they risk disrupting and invalidating the rational work of ufology in much the same way the 1960s peace movement, which was based on strong rational arguments, seemed to have been co-opted and neutralized by hippie drug culture. In the interview, Dolan explicitly laments that many people are increasingly appearing on the scene strongly advocating that everyone should just stare at their navels and think loving thoughts, and together we'll all magically create a reality where full disclosure occurs and utopia follows. You know, I saw a recent panel discussion at Contact in the Desert that consisted of Richard Dolan, and then about 7 other people, all of whom seem to be completely subsumed into this esoteric, spiritual horseshit that has absolutely no interest in actual evidence, but seems to propel itself along based on a modern New Age dogma.
We have to confront evil. Yeah. We still have to deal with it. That's the thing. And I agree with Victoria that our way of thinking, our minds, do create the kinds of individuals that we will be. The way we think about ourselves is critically important. I'm just saying there's a danger, and I think really we have to be aware of this if we're going to be honest with ourselves, which is that we can think all we want about raising our frequency, but there's still going to be 80 people in this world who are going to try to buy up everything that's worth owning. They're still going to try to keep us as a slave race. Well, and we have to do something about that.
So these are the lion beings, is it? Lion?
They're feline beings, and they, like Sekhmet and Narisha in India, they were the protectors of the gods. They've been around forever, and now they're back.
Okay.
And they're here to protect the forgotten gods, which is you, if you want to attune to them. So we'll go ahead and play this.
Of course, being loving and trying to dampen down your selfishness is a very good idea. But if you want to really serve others, there are very real problems being caused by very evil people on this planet who are going to have to be fought with something more than loving thoughts. Holding hands and singing songs will not defeat them, and the way this kind of irrational, emotional, and, in my opinion, deeply selfish so-called spiritual movement is spreading over ufology like a sticky paste looks to me like a move to kill the field by taking advantage of well-meaning dupes who are much more open and needful than they are responsible and discerning. So, why did I make this video? Because I can tell you I'm definitely not being paid, that's for sure. I don't have a career as a UFO journalist. I'm not a friend or acquaintance of Bill Ryan or the Dark Journalist or Richard Dolan or anyone involved. I've made this video, which was more than a little work. Now, granted, in terms of production value, I don't have the Gaia Studios, or any studio, or a proper microphone, or a professional illustrator, or a slick website, or even a pair of dark shades. But the reason I put the effort into this is because I'm irritated to see the effect the good movement is having on ufology, which it appears to be setting up to burn at the stake. I am obviously interested in this field, but like Kyle, my orientation is that the best way to serve the field of ufology is to be brutally skeptical of all claims, anything being presented as evidence, people's testimony, to be open-minded but also very scrupulous in my scrutiny, especially when people come at ufology with individualized, self-centered tales of adventure and tragedy for which there is no witness testimony and no evidence. I approach the subject and individual claims like a trained and ethical journalist would approach any other topic area. I've had my own odd experience seeing something flying in the sky that I could not identify and which I could never explain to my own satisfaction. But this was a personal experience that I had while alone and not evidence of anything concrete or specific. To this day, I haven't come to a conclusion about what it was. That's what the U is about in the acronym UFO or UAP, the things unidentified. We try to figure out what it might be. As long as it remains a UFO or UAP, that means by definition that it has not been identified. Substantive research within the field of ufology is about looking at cases and whatever exists as possible evidence and executing a strategy of deduction based on a combination of probability and plausibility. One of the things you have to face about ufology is that, to this date, the amount of interesting physical evidence that is publicly verifiable and possibly indicative of the alien visitation hypothesis would fit into a large trunk, if even that. The only way any of us are going to extract anything of value out of this field, and the prize could very well be something that changes the entire world, is to be strictly disciplined in our discernment and in our judgment. That means not blindly believing an ex-copy machine maintenance guy who says wise aliens have sent him here to bring us salvation by telling us to love one another. There have been other cults like that, pretty recently actually. and they ended very badly. And with that said, I think now is a good time to speculate a little bit on what might exactly be going on with Corey Goode. Is he just a nasty, calculating, pathological liar? Well, let's explore that for a second. One of the things that's kind of held up as a proof that Corey is being genuine is the fact that many people, including myself and body language experts, do not get an overwhelming sense of deception from him by the way he presents himself and communicates his information. Now, I would like to note that all you need to do to become a body language expert is the following. I'm a body language expert. There, I'm now qualified. And that is to say that there is no qualification to be a body language expert. That said, it doesn't mean body language analysis is not useful if it's done by somebody who has some skill in that art. It's just not a science, okay? So it's important to note that a genuinely capable and accomplished sociopath is capable of fooling body language experts, is capable of fooling even very critically minded people who are pretty good at picking up on signs of BS. And they are even capable of fooling a lie detector test quite convincingly. So I guess the simplest and most obvious explanation would be that Corey Goode is some kind of high-level narcissistic sociopath who has gotten through most of his life sort of putting on a show or feigning expertise in this or that until he discovered the best possible con he could have discovered, which was this entire story that he's invented. So that's obviously option number one. It's the simplest possibility. It's certainly the option that the dark journalist likes to put forth. But, you know, I was talking about this with Kyle, and there's a kind of more nuanced interpretation of Corey Goode. It could really be this. Some people have the ability to self-hypnotize. That is to say, make themselves truly and genuinely believe something that is not based in reality. A perfect example of someone who does this for a living quite legitimately would be a very accomplished method actor. Famous examples include Philip Seymour Hoffman and Heath Ledger. These actors essentially convince themselves that they are another person with a unique set of different life experiences. And when they perform in a film or on stage, they do everything they can do to truly believe that they are the person they are portraying. So Corey may be an example of someone who is doing this. He may have hypnotized himself in a way similar to method acting, where he genuinely believes what he is saying is real. Now, it's hard to reconcile that with the ongoing interactions with the alien beings, but perhaps Corey has vivid dreams and he kind of mixes it all together and convinces himself he's had a powwow with 8-foot-tall autistic blue birdmen from outer space. A method actor knows somewhere inside, as we all know as audience members, that it is a performance. So if this is what's happened with Jimmy Goode, the two main things to note are that he isn't confessing to giving a performance, nor does he appear to break character, which would put this explanation squarely in the realm of a self-induced delusion. And now for the more conspiratorially minded. And yeah, I'm looking at you, Sean M. Some note that Corey's stated memories of his suspected involvement in a secret government program were very fuzzy and vague until he went to have surgery for a detached retina. Apparently, there were severe complications during that surgery. Apparently, he spent 4 times longer than normal in that surgery. And according to his wife, the vividness of his secret space program memories and all of the 20 and back programs he says he participated in came flooding in after he came out of that surgery. And in fact, according to his wife, the memories were so intense and disturbing that Corey had something of a mental breakdown. So for you conspiracy buffs out there, a more interesting yet less likely answer, in my opinion, is that Corey is the unwitting victim of an ongoing government mind control and disinformation campaign. As in, they clockwork oranged his ass while he laid on the surgery table. One thing is for sure, anyone watching this must have their incredulity dial set to 0 if they do not recognize that what appears to be forming around Corey bears all the hallmarks of a cult. In the end here, my advice for anyone who's looking at this and may be having second thoughts or may just be shaking their head wondering, what is all this? It seems awfully complicated. Well, my advice is not to get bogged down in all these weeds. Don't worry about the Satanism stuff. Don't obsess over whether Chronicles from the future is something that Corey read or something that someone else read and then fed details to him, or another amazing correlation. You can tell that this whole thing is a shit show and that those weeds are designed to distract you from the only thing that really matters, which is this. By his own admission, Corey has had ample opportunity to record and or acquire evidence proving his story is true. Does he have said evidence? No. And why does he not have it? Because it goes against his religion, which also happens to be the religion he's identified as having been written and recommended by the aliens who sent him. It's that simple. And now you know what Corey Goode is, which is incredibly ironic when you consider Corey's prime directive, which was to not start a cult. Don't be a cult leader. Don't be a cult leader.
It's your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KTRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
We now to the year 1985. You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Wow, man, let's get loud.
Don't start a cult.